Hello, I am Sachi Yanari-Rizzo, Curator of Prints and Drawings. Every other month, I present a gallery talk virtually and in the Print and Drawing Study Center. For this season's Print Room Talks, I've been focusing on works by artists from creative families. Today, we will be looking at works from the permanent collection by husband and wife, Bruce Nauman and Susan Rothenberg. Their marriage was a second one for both of them. I probably couldn't have picked two more different artists. Susan Rothenberg was primarily a painter and worked in prints. She explored subjects that sustained her for long periods of time. Bruce Nauman has pushed the boundaries of what art is, often working conceptually and with untraditional art materials. He has worked in everything from neon, fiberglass, sound, film, video, holograms, photography, performance to sculpture, but not painting. As art critic Peter Plagans has observed, his signature style, that thing that all successful artists are supposed to have, is his lack of signature style. A notable fact for our local audience is that Bruce Nauman was born here in Fort Wayne, Indiana in 1941. His father was a sales engineer for General Electric Corporation. I don't believe he lived here very long, for his father's job had them moving every few years to places like Appleton and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Schenectady, New York. In 1960, Naumann entered University of Wisconsin-Madison and studied physics and mathematics. This may sound surprising, but not as much as we talk more about his art, especially when Naumann explained, "I was interested in the logic and structure of math, and especially how you could turn that logic inside out." Turning things inside out is what he would often do in art. When Naumann moved to art, he studied with Italo Scanga and lithography with Alfred Sessler from 1962 to 64. Naumann studied with artists who matured through the Works Progress Administration, and they conveyed their moral, ethical, and political beliefs in class. He received his bachelor's degree in 1964. Naumann received his MFA with an emphasis in sculpture in 1966 from University of California, Davis, where he received a very different education there, studying with William T. Wiley and Robert Arneson of the Bay Area funk movement. He was introduced to the iconoclastic ideas of Marcel Duchamp, whose work exhibited humor and an untraditional approach to art materials. During the mid-60s, Naumann was experimenting with fiberglass sculptures, performances, and films. He said, "When I was in art school, I thought art was something I would learn how to do, and then I would just do it. At a certain point, I realized that it wasn't going to work like that. Basically, I would have to start over every day and figure out what art was going to be." In Self-Portrait as a Fountain, seen here, Naumann presents himself shirtless, shooting a stream of water out of his mouth. In some ways, this is reminiscent of the numerous carved figures found in decorative fountains. Naumann once said, "The true artist is an amazing, luminous fountain." At the same time, he makes a sly nod to Marcel Duchamp's ready-made sculpture Fountain from 1917 that was a porcelain urinal that the artist signed and presented as a sculpture. Like Duchamp's Fountain, Naumann's photograph pushes the definitions of art. Since we only own one print by Naumann, I thought I would run through a few of my favorite prints. Raw War is one of Naumann's earliest prints, and the first that is text-based. The first row of letters spelling war is fittingly written in red, but the letter R is in the wrong orientation, allowing the viewer to read it backwards as raw as well. Naumann refers to this as front-back interplay. Raw War is a lithograph, and by the nature of the process, the finished print is a mirror of the image on the stone. Naumann enjoys putting together deceptively simple words and phrases that are not usually connected with each other or used in the same context. His print forces us to view the words in a new way, and this changes the meaning. Communication is important to Naumann and how language functions. He likes the way the front-back interplay and image reversal confuses the information. Naumann said, "I'm really interested in the different ways that language functions. That is something I think a lot about, which also raises questions about how the brain and the mind work. The point where language starts to break down as a useful tool for communication is the same edge where poetry or art occurs. Naumann had created raw war in neon a year earlier, flashing the word raw in red and war in orange. Interestingly, when Naumann began studying art at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, the only course initially available to him was in lettering. Perhaps this was an early influence on his text-based work. Given the neon work and the print were made in the early 1970s, they carry political connotations, particularly with the Vietnam War. Naumann began creating neon works in 1965. He doesn't disguise its origins. He embraces its connection to commercialism as signs on the streets used often to advertise lounges, hotels, and nighttime entertainment. In the neon version of violence, silence, the word silence is nearly illegible. In the dry point version, Naumann wrote out the word violence and drew 3 violins, helping to visualize the pun. Rather than utilizing a front-back play on words, Naumann turned to homonyms in this case, words that sound similar but diverge immensely in meaning. Similar to Naumann's use of wordplay to elicit multiple associations are his works that begin with a children's game, like musical chairs or the spelling game Hangman. Naumann commented, "When I take the game, I take it out of the context and apply it to a moral or political situation, or I load it emotionally in a way that it is not supposed to be loaded." In 1985, Naumann created a neon piece called Hanged Man, replicating the word game wherein the player needs to guess the correct letters of the opponent's unknown word before the stick figure body is gradually completed with each incorrect guess and the figure is hanged. What is initially a fun game takes on a sinister tone. For the museum's dry point small carousel on the right, Naumann focuses on the popular children's amusement park ride. The print is related to Naumann's sculptures where he replaces the horses and animals with suspended polyurethane or cast aluminum shapes. Our small carousel was done in dry point. When the artist moves a dry point needle through the metal plate, a small burr is raised. This burr holds extra ink when it is printed and is the cause of the fuzzy lines that are characteristic of the process. Naumann stated that the few times that I made dry points, I wanted to make the particular kind of line. I really like the quality of that line and the quality of the ink. The velvety lines that add emphasis to areas in this is in contrast to the dry scratchy marks that we see encircling the animals. Hanging Carousel, George Skins a Fox from 1988 on the left was one of the selected works in Naumann's installation as the representative in the American Pavilion at the 2009 53rd Venice Biennial. He won the Golden Lion for Best National Participation. In this work, Naumann utilized taxidermy forms that are used in mounting animal skins. To operate like a carousel, Naumann added an electric motor that powered the carousel's rotation. A video monitor in the center shows George skinning the fox. The stainless steel version of Carousel on the right has an initially lighthearted effect as the animals rotate around an armature made up of a guide machine that horses would use to warm down after being ridden. These skinless forms take on an abstract or embryonic quality as certain features are not entirely realized. These manufactured generic lurking figures are suspended and dragged in an endless race or chase of lynx, deer, and coyotes. A sign of their reluctance to move are the marks made by their feet, dragging, creating a drawing on the floor. In subsequent works, the taxidermy forms were cut in pieces and reassembled into new hybrids. Naumann makes this children's form of entertainment both humorous and uncomfortable as he combines an amusement with children's amusement with the visceral quality of carcasses in a slaughterhouse and the intriguing world of collecting. Susan Rothenberg was born in Buffalo, New York in 1945. She grew up going to the Albright Knox Art Gallery and taking classes. Her artistic talent was recognized and encouraged. Rothenberg reflected on her early years. I think you often become what you are praised for when you are very small. And I think I was about the only thing I was praised for. I was not a real well-behaved child. Although she briefly considered becoming a veterinarian because of her love of animals, she enrolled at Cornell University's Fine Arts School in 1962, originally intending to study sculpture. There she became acquainted with fellow artists Alan Serrett and Gordon Matta Clark. She completed her BFA in painting in 1967. In 1969, she moved to New York and reconnected with college friends, and through them met a large network of artists and musicians and experimented in art. She had worked on performance pieces with Joan Jonas and notably helped Nancy Graves, seen here, who had just exhibited her life-size camel works at the Whitney. Rothenberg and several other artists helped Graves fabricate fossil-like camel leg parts for variability of similar forms, 1970, which is a stand of 36 legs. Around this time period, she married sculptor George Tracus, and they had a daughter who was born in 1972. In 1974, Rothenberg found herself unconsciously doodling a single simplified horse. This evolved into a series of paintings based on the sketch. The horse itself was very pale and an earth color, with the horse faintly divided by a vertical line running down the center. She made little differentiation between figure and ground, unifying the two with the same color and brushwork. Rothenberg explained that the sketch developed out of her process pieces in which she would rip her canvases. She had discovered a central line in the ripping, which she adapted by drawing the line. The image held the space and the line kept the picture flat. The subsequent series of paintings of horses in profile provided her with an opportunity to explore abstraction. She commented, "I think it was a surrogate for dealing with a human being, but at the same time, it was neutral enough and I had no emotional relationship to horses." While the image posed no strong personal connection with the artist, it was one of familiarity and easily recognizable with a simple silhouette and called to mind things such as early cave paintings and symbols. The horses were singular or sometimes in pairs, stationary or in motion, compositions divided by vertical, horizontal, and cross lines. Rothenberg's paintings can be viewed as the synthesis or a bridge between abstract expressionist paintings and minimalism. Her expressive, painterly brushwork were in balance with flat fields and linear geometry approached in a series. In response to the regular question of why horses, Rothenberg had been known to say, "Well, I can't picture these as giraffes." Inanimate objects wouldn't have worked well either. She said that she enjoyed the tension. The horse has the potential for motion and is volumetric, and yet she didn't always depict it that way. The works are simultaneously abstract, yet representational, and organic and geometric at the same time. Rothenberg's horse imagery marked a renewed interest in painting and in figuration. The Whitney Museum of American Art documented this trend in their 1978 exhibition entitled New Image Painting. The exhibition essentially announced that painting was no longer dead and was an opportunity to explore a variety of strategies as seen in the works of Nicholas Africano, Jennifer Bartlett, Neil Jenny, and Robert Moskowitz, among others. Rothenberg was represented by 6 paintings in the exhibition. By the time New Image Painting opened in December 1978, Rothenberg was beginning to deconstruct the horse form. She began making drawings of fragments and a series of abstract human heads. In blue frontal on the left, we see a standing horse head-on, framed by white cropped front legs. The bony legs are similar in placement in arms and hands, making shadowy shapes in Hands and Shadows from 1978 to 79. Besides making some lino cuts while in college, Rothenberg's first exploration of printmaking in the print studio was in 1977 when she made a lithograph at Derriere Latoile Studios in which she depicted a profile of a horse in motion bisected by a vertical line reinforcing the flatness of the work. It is not uncommon for a painter first exploring printmaking to use the new medium as a way to explore what has been done in paint. We can see this in the comparison between Blue Frontal and the museum's Untitled May #1 on the left. The full-bodied horse is now galloping and fills much of the composition. The edges of the white legs are cropped and disconnected with the torso. Their bony quality seems faintly reminiscent of Nancy Graves's sculpture of fossil legs. Rothenberg worked in spit bite and sugar lift aquatint. Rather than working in negative, she used these processes that allowed her to paint the image directly on the plate with either an acid or sugar solution. In the museum's May #2 on the right, the horse form has dematerialized even further, leaving only the two disembodied legs. It is interesting to note that around this time, her marriage was also dissolving. Rothenberg was preoccupied with the horse for 6 years. Returning to drawing, she made heads and hands morphing. It was a way of introducing the human form. In 1980, she painted 5 large-scale canvases where heads and hands were combined. She said, "I figured that's what a painter is, a head and a hand." In Untitled Dancer, we see how the artist's mark making was beginning to change to a more expressive handling. Increasingly, her work was seen as a connection between new image painting and neo-expressionism, which revived the use of figurative subject matter, intense color, and heavy brushwork seen in the work of Julian Schnabel, Francesco Clemente, and Georg Baselitz. The museum's Monkey in a Tree from 1984 was created at the renowned collaborative printmaking workshop, Universal Limited Art Editions, or ULAE. Rothenberg's approach in paint would have been very spontaneous and expressive, at odds with the pre-planning usually necessary for printmaking. The master printers at ULAE attempted to modify printmaking tools to respond like familiar drawing materials. So in etching, Rothenberg might use a bamboo pen and sugar lift, which is applied by brush. For lithographs as seen in Monkey in a Tree, the ULAE printers developed a way to make the drawing material charcoal, greasy so that it could be used on a lithostone. Even though there are litho crayons and pencils, Rothenberg experienced some resistance on the surface, unlike moving charcoal on paper. To achieve this, they wrapped charcoal with pieces of cotton towel soaked in oleic acid, which made the charcoal receptive to grease. When drawing with the charcoal, it left greasy marks on the stone. We see in Monkey in the Tree that their solution allowed Rothenberg to draw as freely as she would on paper. In February 1989, Bruce Nauman and Susan Rothenberg married. Rothenberg doesn't work from life, but rather from memory. In this small way, this is something shared with Naumann. She admired his work ever since she first encountered it in 1969. She said, "I've known him just hi, how are you? Nice to see you. Liked your show for 20 years, and I've always had a crush on the guy. I actually even wrote him a fan letter once, which he doesn't remember. Even a prearranged lunch through another artist was forgotten." Rothenberg continued, "I would see Bruce for 5 minutes every 3 or 4 years. I would go to an opening just to see him." Naumann became cognizant of Rothenberg's work from an exhibition of her heads and hands. He commented, "I liked it a lot and thought about it a lot. I'd been thinking about a head and about hands, and her work helped to clarify my thinking." And actually, Naumann has worked with body fragments in his sculptural work repeatedly. In 1988, Angela Westwater, who was both Rothenberg and Naumann's dealer, hosted a dinner party after Naumann's exhibition opening and arranged for the two to be seated together. 4 months later, they were married at Staten Island City Hall. They spent the next year in a cross-country relationship between New York and Calistio, New Mexico, so that Rothenberg's daughter could finish high school. Their home and studio in New Mexico was a 600-acre ranch about 25 miles from Santa Fe. However, they remained removed from the artist's colony in Santa Fe. Rothenberg's Blue UTurn began as a portrait of Naumann. It depicts a man's head and torso that curves in a U shape. Rothenberg said, I think those U-turn forms started out to be Bruce, but they could be me too. I felt like I was being flexed to extreme points, happy about my new life with Bruce, and also having second thoughts about leaving New York. The museum's meso-fist number 2 on the left shares the curving form that we saw in blue U-turn. We see the related meso-fist number 1 on the right. The title mezzo is reminiscent of the musical terms like mezzo forte, meaning moderately loud, or mezzo piano, moderately soft. Is this a medium or moderate fist then? In number 1, the fist is drawn multiple times with subtle tonalities suggesting movement. In number 2, the fist is drawn up to the figure's face, flexing the muscle or perhaps in a state of contemplation. However, the title is a playful reference to her use of the printmaking technique mezzotint. Although invented in the 17th century and was popular for reproducing portrait paintings, it is not commonly used today because it is so laborious. In mezzotint, you work from dark to light. The image emerges from the darkness. The metal plate is first roughened by using a rocker. The artist softens and smooths the roughened areas, which reduces the amount of ink that can be held in those parts of the plate. Mezzotint is capable of creating a range of rich tonalities and atmospheric qualities that we can see here. Rothenberg reflected, prints have always presented problems in thinking for me. The reversal of the image and the flattening of the materials is a struggle, but there are 2 forms, woodcut and mezzotint, that offer a way of exploring images that painting and drawing can't. Perhaps she appreciated that you had to work subtractively, working from dark to light in both processes. The museum's listening bamboo pictured here is a woodcut and is extraordinary in size, measuring 54 by 83 inches. Rothenberg carved into the wood to create white lines of the face and the bamboo, rather than carving away the material to leave the lines to be printed in black. The background is an interesting flat pattern that suggests wood grain. Rothenberg explored the motif of the fragmented head, bamboo, and wood grain a second time at ULAE, but in this version, she added color. The move to New Mexico had an impact on Rothenberg's work as she was inspired by the desert landscape and the animals at their home. Naumann is a rancher who breeds, raises, trains, and sells quarter horses. As of 2009, they had 14 horses, 3 dogs, and 6 chickens on the ranch, which Rothenberg fed. Dead Rooster 4 is the last print we have in the collection by the artist. There was a small edition printed in red, but this one in black ink was published as a benefit for the Museum of Modern Art. Perhaps it isn't surprising that the figure, again, is emerging out of a dark background, as in meso-fist number 2 and listening bamboo. Rothenberg retained a sense of immediacy, forcefully gouging, and allowed the off-white color of the paper for all the lines rather than black ink. Sadly, Rothenberg passed away in 2020 at the age of 75 and 30 years of marriage to Naumann. Rothenberg currently has a solo exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art on view through June 12th. Naumann's work is on view at Palazzo Grassi in Venice through November 27th. Thank you again for joining me today. Please look for the next print room talk on Wednesday, July 20th, 2022, when we will look at the art of John and Lynn Bauer.